and welcome back to UView. I'm Jasper Zellmer. We are honored to be joined in ACMI Studio B by Arlington School District Superintendent Dr. Elizabeth Homan, who's here today to talk about her own path to get this position and share her vision for the new high school and beyond. Dr. Homan, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so first of all, everyone knows the superintendent is very important, but what do you do?
That's a great question. A different thing every single day, I could say that. So primarily my job is to make sure that the district is running smoothly, to make sure that students have everything that they need, to make sure that I'm listening to the needs of the entire school community, families, teachers, and ensuring that we have a strong budget to move forward and that we're implementing the policies and procedures that are set forward by the Arlington School Committee, which is the board that I report to. The other really important part of my job is that I call snow days. And that's never an easy decision, except for the snowstorm we just had, which was a very easy decision because we had so much wonderful snow. Not this past weekend, but the one before that. I joke about that. It doesn't happen very often. It's not a decision I usually have to make, but often students have some opinions about it.
They always do.
Yeah.
So what does your day look like on a normal day?
Okay. I don't have those very often, but I would say one of the favorite things that I really like to do is go out and visit schools. I try not to spend so much time in my office that I'm just sitting in front of a computer and doing sort of paperwork and decision stuff, but I really like to go out into schools and talk to the students. I've done focus groups with a lot of the students to start my year, and I think that's something I want to make sure that I continue to do because it helps me understand what the experience is like in classrooms. And that can help me lead leaders because I supervise all the principals and the central office team as well and help them understand like what little changes and tweaks could we make to make the student experience better, to make sure that students are learning the things they're really excited about and want to learn, and to make sure that our teachers are really connecting with students and that our admins are connecting with families and students in the best way possible.
Wow, that's really impressive. That's amazing. So how did you end up as a superintendent?
That's a good question. I was not expecting to become one.
Really?
No, not at all. I started out as a teacher. I taught English. I taught middle school and high school English for several years. And then from there, I went on to get my doctorate. My husband and I have moved all over the country. We've lived in Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan before we moved to Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so, I've studied education in a lot of different states and ultimately ended up in a situation where the opportunity presented itself for me to become an administrator. And I found that I really like whole systems level work and thinking about how an entire organization works together to meet the needs of students. And here I am.
Yeah. So did you have a teacher growing up that inspired you to become an educator?
Oh, absolutely. So I had several of them, but one that really stands out in my memory and is probably the reason I became an English teacher was my English teacher in high school. I had her for a composition and rhetoric class.
Oh, wow.
And also for my AP English class when I was a senior. And she was inspiring to me because she handed the control of the classroom over to the students. We ran all of our discussions. We read a lot of amazing texts, many of them by authors of color and female authors, which wasn't very common at the time, particularly in rural Illinois, which is where I grew up. So she showed me a way of learning that I don't think I had ever seen previously in my educational experience. And then when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be an English teacher and I wanted to help students think about the world differently and think about perspectives that they might not share through their education. So, yeah. So
how do you think your jobs as teachers affected your job as a superintendent and as an administrator?
Yeah. I still think of myself as a teacher, even though I know I've been out of the classroom for a while now, over a decade now. First doing my doctoral studies and now as an administrator. But I think that what was most invigorating to me in my work as a teacher was the interactions that I had with students. And I would say the same thing about being a teacher that I just said about being a superintendent. Every day was different. And I loved that because the students walked in every day with a different set of things they were thinking about, of challenges they were grappling with, and I got to work directly with them to move through those things. And that's still what matters most to me as a superintendent. It grounds me in making sure that whatever decisions we're making, they're going to positively impact all of you and your experience in schools. So I try to keep that with me because I think it's really important for me to always be remembering that in my work.
So what's your overall philosophy on education?
I love this question because I'm a bit of a dreamer, and I'm a hopeless optimist, and I like to imagine things
of course
in the most ideal way that they could be. So my philosophy is that, first of all, that students learn most when they get to see the connections between things, across disciplines, between ideas, and that we're motivated when we're challenged. So engagement equals being really challenged by the work in front of you and being really curious about the world. And so I think the best education is one that inspires that curiosity, that welcomes it into the classroom, that is ready for hard questions to get asked, even when those hard questions may cause some uncomfortable conversation. And so I think the best education is one that allows the space for that, for students to take risks, to try on new things, to try on new identities and ideas and perspectives. And that requires a lot of trust and a lot of relationship building, and some boundaries and parameters and high expectations that, you know, it can be hard to establish in a school. So those are some of the things that ground me. I'm really interested in approaches to education that inspire deeper learning and an opportunity for students to spend extensive periods of time on things that they've chosen to pursue. So those are a couple other things that guide my philosophy.
Yeah, so I think a lot of those views kind of have to do with recent debate among the student body. So I'd like to bring up heterogeneous classes if I can. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is an initiative that the high school principal has been leading along with several teachers. And just for context for anybody who's watching, several teachers and students in this high school, as well as some families. And this is something that I've actually worked on in other districts where I've been, where I was the assistant superintendent. We had a large initiative that focused on unleveling or removing levels from particularly mathematics. And then we worked our way up from the middle school level into the high school in that district. And there are a lot of districts around this area that have made this shift to allow students who are either taking courses at different levels to be in the same classroom and maybe making more flexible choices about what work they want to pursue in the context of taking that class, or have just eliminated levels altogether and said, we're not going to sort of structure students around perceived ability level. And I think that that's really at the core of what this sort of adjustment to school structures is about, is making sure that we're not locking into a structure a denial of access. And so I support initiatives like this and healthy conversation around them, which I think is necessary because it can be hard to wrap your head around, especially if you went up through a system that had honors level courses and you've benefited from that system, or you've done well in life, right? That it can be really hard to imagine a different way of doing things. But one of the benefits of approaches like this is that it does give people access to a lot of different ways of learning, a lot of different approaches to gaining access to the curriculum. And importantly, it doesn't lock students into a particular identity about what kind of learner they are. And I think that's at the core of why movements like this, conversations like this are really important, is that if we group students according to perceived ability level, whether it's the adult's perceived ability level, their perceived ability level, or their parents' perceived ability level of the student, then we really risk forming an identity around that students carry with them for their entire academic career. And the reality is we are all excellent at a lot of things. And we all have areas where we could stand to grow. And if we limit ourselves structurally to those perceptions when students are very young, then we risk perpetuating negative perceptions about ability throughout a student's or a child's educational career and then on into their adult life, which can be potentially damaging and has been damaging. I mean, this can be at the root of some of the inequities that we see in education and then in society when we begin to group students when they're very, very young into particular ability groupings. So I think those are big conversations that are at the core of a really sort of technical conversation that we're having about how do we build classes and how do we structure them. But I think it's an important one and one worth having. So I'm really glad that Dr. Jenger's leading that along with members of his team.
Yeah, I couldn't have said any of that better myself, so yeah, thank you. So in addition to that initiative, what are some other goals that you have for Arlington Public Schools?
Sure. So I just finished doing my entry process, which involved a whole lot of listening to a whole lot of people, students, family members, staff members, and I've heard from a lot of them about what's really important to them. And there are a few things that I shared as part of an entry plan report that I gave to the school committee just a couple of days ago about what I think we need to do next. I'll share a couple of them with you. One is to look at elementary literacy. We're going to take a look at the curriculum resources there. We've done a lot of really positive work around making sure that students are learning like how words work and how sounds work. And that's had a really positive impact on our younger students.
Wow.
And now it's time to look at the full range of K to 5 and make sure that our curriculum is supporting students in reading informational text and getting really rich vocabulary around rich topics. And we want to take a look at the core curriculum we're using to see if we're doing that. And then another one that I highlighted was an analysis of achievement gaps and opportunity gaps. Where are we giving students access to every opportunity that Arlington Public Schools offers? And where might we be throwing up obstacles that we don't intentionally place, like in terms of families accessing materials for the schools in their home language, or ease of access to communications that come from the school, or access to athletics or instrumentals without needing to pay fees, for example. So those are some areas that I think we'll be looking at in the years ahead, but we'll have a strategic planning team that's going to do a lot of the work around helping us know what the community really wants us to do next.
Nice. So you've worked in a number of different districts so far in your career. What are some of the differences you've noticed right off the bat from Arlington from your past communities?
Sure. So one of the things that I've definitely noticed is a difference in Arlington that is one of the things I love about Arlington, and one of the reasons why I came to Arlington, is that this is a community that really values civic engagement, which I think is awesome for all of you as students, because it shows you and it models for you that what it's like to be an adult who participates in their community, who's on committees and commissions, who runs for elected office. Arlington has a town meeting structure unlike anything I ever saw in the Midwest, and even very different from the communities I've been part of here in Massachusetts, in that there is a large town meeting, and that is the governing body for the town. And they take recommendations and they take warrants from members of the community and vote on them in an open forum. And that's really something that is unique to Arlington, and that is another example of how this town really cares about making sure that its citizens are involved and that voices are heard. And it's something that I think helps the schools prioritize an understanding of how government operates, how to make change in your world, how societies can be reshaped through government action and through civic engagement, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. How do you apply that philosophy to your daily life?
It is a good fit for me as a superintendent because it can be easy as a leader to make decisions in isolation. And, sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes, like with the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been moments where you got to make a call on something because it's urgent and it's a matter of public health. But there are also a lot of opportunities, even within something like the COVID situation, to bring other voices in and to hear what people's perspectives are and to let that shape how you respond when new policies land on your doorstep. And you have to build a new protocol for that. So, that philosophy for Arlington has been one that I've sort of tried to live by myself as a leader. And I do the work that I feel is necessary to get a lot of people around an idea in order to make the kind of change that you want. Because when you have a coalition of people who understand the direction that you want to head together, it's much easier to make significant changes that will promote equity, that will promote access to what we want all kids and families to have access to.
Yeah, I think that's something everyone can apply to everyone's daily life. Yeah. So how you were talking a little bit about how COVID has affected your job and making decision making. How is it, more broadly, how has it affected your time here in Arlington so far?
Well, I will say one of the things that I have not enjoyed so much is the fact that I have to meet so many people from the eyes up. I would love to meet more people with the full face, but we'll hit a point where that will be more doable. And it's also challenging because I've had to meet a lot of people on Zoom.
Right.
And I will say I'm a bit zoomed out. I'm ready
Aren't
to
we all?
be touched with Zoom. That has definitely shifted the landscape of things a bit. It's going to take me a little longer to learn everybody's names. It's taking me a little longer to place people, like you belong at that school, you belong at that school. And that, that for me actually really is a big challenge because I like to know the people who I'm working with very well. But the tours and focus groups have certainly helped with that.
Yeah.
And this invitation has helped with that too.
Oh yeah, of course. We're so happy to have you here.
Yeah.
So what challenges has it caused besides, Zoom and stuff, like in person, moving back in person here? What challenges have you experienced?
It certainly is a particular challenge that we are constantly dealing with some of the operational needs to respond to a shifting situation. And that takes people's time, right? So we have leaders who would really love to be doing proactive work and focusing on instruction and visiting classrooms a little more often than we're sometimes able to when the Omicron surge hits, or when we have to build a new recovery plan because we're shifting our instructional model once again. So those challenges have sort of slowed down some of the work we really want to get going, like heterogeneous grouping conversations or ELA curriculum. But importantly, we're still making sure those things move forward too.
Yeah. So I know the state is requiring schools to be in person this year, but if the choice was yours, what would you decide about that?
Interesting.
I know that's a really difficult question, but
you're giving me power I don't have in this situation. But sure, I think that schools need to meet the needs of students. And so I think that there can be flexible models that allow for some combination of in-person connection with someone, which I do think is very important to education. Young minds, all humans, all minds need someone to connect with face-to-face. We are a social species. However, I also think that there are certain modes of learning that work really well for certain people and better than others, and at certain times of day that work better than others. Some students need to work during the day. And so I think that we can be more creative about how we offer up an education to students. We don't need to be within the walls and the confines of the 8:30 to 3 p.m. school day. And granted maybe the opportunity to be here for a while, we may be able to imagine what that would look like.
So I'm hearing a lot of, in the past 20 minutes or so, a lot of the equity is important to you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that in education?
Sure. So I shared 3 values in my entry plan when I first got here. And they were excellence, empathy, and equity. And so by equity, I mean that every single student who enters through our doors, every family attached to that student, has absolutely equal access to every opportunity in the system. We talk a lot about achievement gaps in education. And this goes along with the excellence value. And those achievement gaps are really, they're fine to look at because they give us information, but they're indicative of opportunity gaps. And what you really want to seek out in education, if you're looking to improve equity, is the opportunity gap. Where is somebody being denied the opportunity to access this? And how is that coming to them? Is it a message they're receiving from a teacher about what they're capable of? Is it the way they're connecting with their peers and the environment we create and the expectations we create around that? And it's easy to see the achievement gap. There's a graph for that. It's hard to see the opportunity gap because that's built into the everyday interactions that we have. And so I also believe in equity as grounded in the tiniest interactions of a school system, of any organization. It's in how you and I talk to one another. It's in how a student interacts with a teacher or with a peer. And we have to get that granular in order to really be able to see where the opportunity gaps live in our system and then ripple out through the organization. And when you can start to shape and mold those smaller things, you can have a really big impact on the organization or the system as a whole.
So besides the Heterogeneous Grouping Initiative, are there any other projects you want to share with us to help you work towards that goal of, stabling, equity, excellence? What was the other one?
Empathy.
Empathy.
Sure. So in my view, when folks ask me, what are your equity initiatives? I will sometimes respond with all of them. Because I think if you're not doing an initiative because it improves equity, you maybe shouldn't be doing that initiative.
Exactly,
But some big ones that are coming up is that we're going to do an equity audit for the entire district. And we have found a partner who's going to help us do that. And they'll be doing interviews with students, with teachers, with staff members, also getting in and seeing some instruction, getting to know our curriculum, taking a look at how we hire, taking a look at how we budget, and giving us some recommendations about what areas we might want to look into, helping us identify some of those opportunity gaps. So that's a big one on the horizon. Another one is some strategic planning work for the district so that we can have a common vision and some common language about what it is we're looking for. And my hope is that that group, which will be a big stakeholder group because we need to have everybody involved, is going to help us identify some priorities that will help us drive towards equity as well.
Nice. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you now.
Sure.
So what are your hopes for the new building project at Arlington High School?
I am so excited about this. Are you all excited to move into the new building?
I'm so excited. It's gonna be great.
Have you had a chance to see it yet?
I have not, but I'm really hoping that I can't wait.
It's beautiful. So I am very much looking forward to the new wing opening. Each phase is going to be its own sort of exciting version of this process. But it will be really nice to have all students having access to that new wing. The wonderful thing about it being the STEAM wing is that every student has a science or a math course. And so everybody's going to have some level of access to that new space. I'm really looking forward to the auditorium opening and for us being able to have fall plays and musicals and other performances there. And I'm really looking forward to having the discourse lab available too. I think that's going to be an exciting new space, the likes of which we really don't have in the older building. So, you know, it's going to be complex. The next phase of the project involves wiping out the courtyard, right? Because they'll be doing all of the demolition for Column House, and we'll sort of be operating in a big U around a construction zone. So the next phase of the project is definitely the most complex. It has the most moving parts, and that part starts in just about a month now.
Yeah, during February break.
Yeah, and it will be going on for about the next 18 months. And I think after that, most of the construction will be behind us, and we'll be mostly moved into some of the new wings with a few classes still in the old wing. And I'm really looking forward to all aspects of it. It's going to be a really exciting new space. It's going to be a hub for the community. I see it as a resource for the community, and a really big resource for students. And it's going to be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, so over February break, when we move into the STEAM wing of the new building, how do you feel about that move?
Well, I feel extremely confident that's going to go smoothly because Mr. McCarthy and Dr. Janger have been on top of every single aspect and detail.
High praise.
And box and label and mover that is associated with this move. So I'm really hopeful that it's going to go off without a hitch. And you know what? If challenges arise, and they almost always do in situations like this that are this complex, we will certainly deal with them. The building construction company that we've been working with and the design company have been fantastic and very responsive. And we also have movers who are helping us actually do the moving so that we're not doing that ourselves. So it should go very well.
How will all of that affect your workspace?
It won't yet because my workspace doesn't go anywhere until the second phase has been built. So my current office is at the top of Fusco House.
Yep.
And I'll stay there for now. What will be interesting is I will be watching it out my window. So my window, I look at the clock tower out my window that's right opposite my desk, and just outside my door, my administrative assistants are right there, and they also look out over Column House. So we will have a bit of a construction noise right outside our windows, but you all have been dealing with that for you know, the past year, and we'll be dealing with it for the next year. So we're in it together. We'll figure it out.
So besides the crazy noise and everything, all that going on, has moving into the new building and the building project in general caused any challenges for your time here in Arlington so far?
I would say it's simply another project that's on top of all the other projects that we're working on. I actually felt very lucky and grateful to be taking on a district that had a high school building project going, because I came from a district that had a high school building project going. And I got to be part of, in that district, all of the sort of planning work that Arlington had already done when I came on. As a matter of fact, those two projects are right on pace with one another. So just as that project began to be built, I moved over to Arlington.
That's amazing.
Where the project was just beginning construction. So it's been nice to, it's such an exciting time to have a new high school being built. And so I was glad not to leave that excitement behind, but to actually have it here too.
I'm glad that you got that.
Yep, it was great.
Yeah. Might be a little bit of a tough question, but what is, in your opinion, from your experience, what is the most difficult thing about your job?
That actually is a challenging question to answer. I would say maintaining the balance of proactive work to reactive work. I strive to make sure every day that I do as much proactive work that is future-oriented and that is purposeful and very important as I do reactive work that is, this must get done now, this decision must be made now, this paperwork must be done now, right? So, and that is a tough balance to achieve, especially when you're in the middle of a pandemic that sometimes demands more reaction than sort of proactive approaches. But I do tell my staff, and I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, that what is urgent is not always important, and what is important is not always urgent. And so you sometimes have to make time for the important stuff. And that's something that I think can be hard. Yeah.
So I remember you talking a little bit earlier about how, you know, motivation is challenge and how you live by that philosophy. How have you stayed motivated over COVID, over the past, you know, crazy couple years?
Sure. Well, I've stayed challenged. So I think a big motivator for me every day is my kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. They keep me challenged and motivated because, you know, I see a world that I'm handing over to them, and I want it to be the best one possible. And I want to know that we can give the best education possible to students and that we can design educational systems that are supportive of their needs. And I want to know that they're going to be advocates for what's right in the world. So, you know, this work helps remind me why I'm in this, which is that I do believe, you know, it's not just an optimistic statement. I do believe we're building the future. What's more the future than the youth of our society who are going to be someday in charge of our society? So my kids are a really big motivator for me every day, and they help me keep it real at home too. So
yeah, I'm sure. What is your favorite thing about your job?
I really do like that every day is different. I really do enjoy thinking about how we can make education better. And I really enjoy doing that with people who are extremely dedicated to the same purpose. And we have in Arlington, you all have some really incredible and intelligent teachers and leaders in this system and staff members who, and I've gotten to witness this since we've been going through the COVID situation, when there's a crisis, they rise to that occasion and they help each other out, and they really ground the work that we do in the human nature of it. And, you know, helping adults lead kids is very motivating for me and exciting. And so I really do enjoy those aspects of it. And doing some of the strategic thinking and planning is also something that I enjoy about this work.
Well, Dr. Homan, thank you so much for being here today. We're so glad to have you here in the studio today. We really appreciate your time. We know you have a very busy schedule, so thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very impressed by this crew, and I've had a great time.
Yeah, well, we hope you can join us again in the future.
You bet.
If you'd like to stay up to date with the ever-changing scene at Arlington High School, you can visit these links that you see on your screen now. A huge thank you to our crew here in the studio. We could not have done it without you. Again, Dr. Homan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of UView. We'll see you next time.